Hey, Clemson family, it's been a big week on the diamonds for both the Tigers softball and baseball teams, and a big commitment for the football team as well. Looking ahead to next year, I'm Bill Zimmerman, and this is the Reign Supreme Alway podcast.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Commitment for basketball as well. A couple of commitments for basketball, but it's been a busy stretch and maybe not a better day for Clemson baseball and softball the same day than what we saw Tuesday night with the softball team beating the number one team in the country on the road in 9 innings and the baseball team shutting out Georgia, that powerhouse Georgia offense, and the Clemson pitching staff getting that job done. You've been talking about Talan Bell for 3 weeks with me, and can't wait till he gets on the mound. Can't wait till he gets on the mound, and he's done pretty well since he's gotten his chances. But last night might have been his biggest chance yet.
Yeah, and that's kind of been you and I what we've been worrying about with this baseball team. We'll get to that football commitment in a minute. We
Yep.
did have a short on that the day it happened, but let's stick with baseball since we're on it and it's kind of fresh. Bell with a big midweek performance. I mean, just outstanding to keep the Bulldogs offense, shut out for as long as he did, and then the rest of the team finished it off. He kind of had some, get his feet under him kind of outings for a while there. And to emerge like this, you love to see that potential. It's not a guarantee he's going to pitch, nothing but shutout innings the rest of the
Right.
season, of course. But for him to do that in a tough test in a midweek against what I believe Georgia's ranked fifth overall, just huge, absolutely huge. And then on the heels of better pitching also during the past weekend, as the Tigers continue to keep an unblemished mark on ACC series, they took 2 out of 3 this past weekend. So a big 3 out of 4 stretch for the Tigers as they try to figure out what's going on. Tell me about what you saw from Drew Titsworth during against Louisville.
Whew. I'll tell you what I liked. I liked everything about it. Again, I think the one thing that has been lacking in this staff is true power arms, and well, that's what Titsworth is. And Eric Bakich even said it. The broadcast said it a couple of times. I can't remember who was on the broadcast to give them credit for saying it, but throw it hard as you can. This pitch, get the next pitch, throw it as hard as you can. Get the next pitch, throw it as hard as you can, and do that for as long as you can. And that's what they wanted out of Drew Titsworth, and it worked. And he got the job done against Louisville. And I think the pitching got the job done, in that Saturday game as well. Even though the bullpen at the end kind of fell apart and they lost the game, the starting pitching was pretty good, and then Ben Bailey was really good. So, it feels like maybe where 2 weeks ago you thought there's one reliable starter. Well, maybe now you've got Aiden Knox, and then now you've got Bailey. Maybe you got Drew Titsworth, and what we saw from Bell last night. Okay, then maybe Darden slides in there a little bit, Ethan Darden. So maybe there's 4 or 5 at least in the mix now, Bill, where a couple weeks ago it didn't feel like Saturday and Sunday was like, how are we going to get through these 2 days every weekend?
Be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. It's free. It's the best place to catch all our episodes, and it's the best place for you to comment with your reactions. And we'll see how Darden progresses with that injury, some arm tenderness. Sometimes that's nothing. Sometimes that's code word for something very big. So we'll just see how that
Right.
plays out down the stretch. But what I really like is that mix and match approach. Eric Bakich likes to shake things up when he can, and that will allow some combinations of, do you have an opener followed by a long guy? Do you leave a guy in for several innings, even if you intended him to be an opener? But hey, he's on a roll. Other teams not seeing the ball well against him. Maybe you let him get through the lineup once. Maybe you let him try to get through the top of the lineup a second time. It just depends, and on the form and what Eric Bakich and Jimmy Bellinger are seeing in any particular game. But suddenly it seems like there's options, right? I mean, for the longest time, it just seemed like Canuck, and then at the start of the season, it was Darden looking very good. He's sort of regressed since then. Maybe it was that injury all along. Maybe credit in some ways that he wanted to pitch through it and support his team. Maybe it's something a little different. You just never know. To see that again, Canuck, Titsworth, Bailey, Fitzgerald had that nice opener against
Yep.
Louisville. It just didn't hold up. So you've got all those possibilities. Maybe Darden when he gets back, guys who can throw long innings. You've seen Legurnick come in as an opener at times. You've seen some other guys uh, pitch early in games, so they'll mix and match and they'll do what they need to do. And then maybe that shakes up the bats a little bit and gets them going like we'd all like to see. I know Georgia is a quality team, but when you get their midweek starter, you'd like to see the number two team in the country put up more than 3 runs.
Yeah, especially after and I keep saying Sunday, but the Saturday game against Louisville where they left so many guys on base. And I said a minute ago the bullpen fell apart in that game. It did at the end of the game, but it never should have gotten to that point. You don't leave the bases loaded multiple times in one game. You don't leave 14 guys on base in a game like that and then go to extra innings, right? That game should not have gone that far. It should have been over, right? They had several chances to put that game away. Tuesday night was not a great night offensively. There were a couple of clutch hits. Dominic Listy had the double slash triple, whatever you want to call it, slash error or whatever that was, to left center field. Cam Canarella had a clutch double that added to the lead, in the seventh inning. So there were a couple of clutch hits, but you'd like to see more hits strung together, and you'd like to see a little bit more power, right? I mean, that's what I think that these two teams, this offense is lacking right now, this lineup. But again, Bill, they're number two in the country. They're what, 35-7, 36-7 now. They in first place, right around first place in the ACC, depending on how you look at the standings. It's kind of hard to scream and yell out about that, even though they did lose the game 3 against Louisville. They took 2 or 3 against a really good Louisville team.
That's right.
But now you've got NC State on the road, you've got Florida State on the road. Those are going to be 2 really tough tests coming up, and we'll see how they match up. But this looks like a top 8 seed. And you get a top 8 seed, you got a really good shot to go to Omaha.
Let's go ahead and skip over to football recruiting because I know it was big news the other day when it broke that Gordon Sellars has decided to come to Clemson University. He'll be a member of that 2026 recruiting class, the third receiver to join that class. And one of the things I mentioned in the YouTube short that I did real quick was I like the complementary skill sets among those 3 guys and how they sort of figure to work together, but in different roles. Also, what I didn't get to mention, which I should have, is I like that these guys all get to sit a year. You won't keep them completely on the bench, but there will be reserves with Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore still on campus, probably Tyler Brown still on campus. And to hear what those guys learned on the fly to get into the lineup for the Tigers. Also, one thing I alluded to is that the class this year coming in, the freshman, has some questions involved with it. But also, all 3 of these guys have more height than those 2 guys. So let's say the two freshmen on the coming year's team are going to find their feet and be just fine. It's still going to be a real complementary group because you have some smaller speed guys, slot type guys, and all 3 of these who are coming in. Although Naeem Burrows at 6 foot could work in the slot and everybody likes his skill set there, they are going to add more height to whoever's going to be thrown to them, whether it's Chris Vizina, Chris Denson, or Tate Reynolds, or Brock Bradley.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who it is playing quarterback after Cade Klubnik leaves, and that's fine. There'll be a competition. See what that is. The thing about it is, Bill, is you say these guys are reserves. Well, what if they are not reserves, right? What if they're that good? They come in and they take over a starting spot. Well, then you got something really, really special. But I like this move, the Sellers pick up. Again, you look at who he picked Clemson over, and according to Grayson Mann at TigerNet, it was Georgia, South Carolina, Michigan, Ohio State. Okay, that's a pretty good list there, right?
Well,
And
I'll tell you what, if Brian Hartline is after you, you've got talent
to play wide receiver,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I like the move there. This is a good group. Again, we'll find out what they are when they get there, but I think you're probably set at receiver unless you oversign for a 5-star or something like that, which obviously can happen. And, there are guys out there who are worthy of that. But if let's say they don't sign any other receivers, or these the three receivers you sign, I think you feel really, really good about this group.
Absolutely. And Sellers, by the way, consensus 4-star across the top four services. Obviously, those ratings are subject to change as the year goes on, but certainly a crowning achievement for this class. This class right now is still heavy on offense. We've talked about that before. There was an addition in the recent weeks with Cameron Cody becoming the first defensive lineman joining this class. Some nice size, 6'3", 285. He's out of Savannah, and certainly Georgia Prep's prospects are able to get the job done more often than not. So you want to see a little more momentum there for Tom Allen's side of the football, but it's good to see that they've at least gotten someone in the front seven committed early.
Yeah, because you look at the list there. There's the three defensive backs, which again you can't really have enough players in any position. I don't think I'm overstating that. You always go get the talent, but you want to see a couple more defensive linemen. And there's guys out there who Clemson are swinging for the fences with in this defensive line class. And Dabo says it all the time. When I get you on campus, I feel pretty good about my shot. So, we'll see what's coming down the line. They're certainly not done with this list. Uh, I would think they would sign what I mean, and again, it depends on who leaves, right? Who leaves in the portal next winter? Who leaves for the NFL? All that. But they signed such a small class this past January. You would think this class is going to be 22, 23, somewhere around there. Clemson never really signs one of those 25, 26, 27 player classes anymore. They're typically in the high teens or the low 20s with these classes, but you would think this next one coming up would be a 22, 23 player class coming up.
Well, and especially if the House settlement goes through, right? What
Right.
they call the House settlement, that will expand the ability to give more scholarships, and so you might see them go a little deeper with this class. I know they're still pursuing what you would think of as an oversign, a defensive back that would make four for this class. They're still looking at another offensive lineman or two being added, which would be a very large group for offensive line, given how Dabo Swinney has sort of kept that down around 15 scholarships most years. Uh, and still looking for a running back in this class as well. So,
Right.
and like you said, swinging for the fences. I know there's a linebacker prospect out there. I don't like to get too much into the names at this point. I like to at least see a commitment before, or widespread projections, crystal balls, those kind of things before we
Yep.
start mentioning guys by name on this show. A lot of great places you can go, whether it's Tiger Illustrated, 247, On3. There's a lot of good coverage of that kind of stuff. TigerNet stays on top of it. Some others as well, Clemson Insider. So find one service that fits you and how you like to digest that content and what you think works for you, and then go keep up with those things for sure. That's how we do it, as well as looking at the tape ourselves sometime as well. So, and if you go back to that YouTube short, you'll see we've got a little bit of film there on Gordon Sellars. So you can check that out, youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. It's going to be kind of a long off season, I think, not just in the recruiting realm, but just looking at the team overall, everything seems kind of set. I don't think there's a ton of position battles. You could say safety is going to be a position battle because you wonder who's going to be back there alongside Khalil Barnes, who's going to emerge as that nickel or the tiger spot, as they're going to call it in Tom Allen's system that he's bringing from Penn State, which isn't all that dissimilar from what Clemson has been doing under Wes Goodwin and Brent Venables. I think we'd all rather discuss Brent Venables. Connect with us on social media. That's at Clemson Kickoff. Whether you're on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, or Facebook, you'll find us there. So we'll see. It's still going to be a 4-3 or a 4-2-5, however you break that down, depending on situations. Offense, so many guys back over there. There's kind of just not a lot. You've got running back you can look at. You've got tight end, prop of guys there. You could see a little bit up in the air there. But for the most part, I think it's going to be, what did you call it a couple of years ago? A quiet off season, and that's a good thing.
I love quiet off seasons. First off, I'd like to see Clemson sign 20 offensive linemen every year. You know that.
There you go.
And I'm
All the
only,
extra spots are now
yeah.
offensive linemen.
You want to play running back? Well, you should have played offensive line in high school. No, and I'm only exaggerating about that a little bit. I would think, I seriously, I'd like to see 5 or 6 offensive linemen in every class, but I know that's not realistic. But they're, yeah, quiet off seasons to me, and it's not a 100% rule. I get that there are exceptions, but when it's a quiet off season, that tends to lead to this team has good leadership, this team is focused, this team's doing its business, it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Some other recruiting news on campus would involve the men's basketball team and the transfer portal. Coach Brad Brownell still doing work. I mean, working the NIL angles, working the portal, and bringing in a much needed guard to help this team out. Daniel, I'll let you talk about that while I share my screen to get his name up
Yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, you look at this class and what this group is. I mean, we're almost set with the roster, it feels like. But Justin Porter, not Justin Portal. Justin Porter is the most recent addition coming from Middle Tennessee State. He's a scorer, which, Bill, we talked about, and you and I've talked about, um, back and forth, maybe texting. Is this group's got to find somebody to get buckets, right? You know, on the perimeter. The big guys have come in, the size has come in, but there's Justin Porter who averaged 15 points a game last year. So, it feels like, is that the last portal edition of a scholarship? Maybe these last 2 spots are non-scholarship. Maybe a couple of these other guys are non-scholarship as well, because we'll find out with the house settlement what the roster looks like. The roster limit is supposedly going to be 15. That can be scholarship. It doesn't have to all be scholarship. So we'll see where those pieces fit. But this roster, and Bill, is so weird to say that name at the top is the only one who has played a game for Clemson.
Yeah.
That is bizarre going into next season. But I also think this roster is more athletic. I think there's a chance for this team to be really good next year. I love the incoming freshman class. I hope the two red shirts work out. Um, you look at Nick Davidson, you look at Carter Welling, they and then bringing back R.J. Godfrey. That kind of feels like the front court. That rotation of 3 guys feels like the front court for those 2 spots, and then you kind of fill in from there. But the roster is really finally starting to take shape.
Yeah, and not a lot, pardon me, not a lot of 3-point shooting coming
Right.
back, but you see some of the bigs that are coming in from the portal, they can shoot threes. Porter does a nice job from 3-point land from what I was seeing, and several games where he was above 20 points if you scroll through his game log. So that average of 15, a little deceptive. Like some nights maybe he just wasn't playing a lot, some nights maybe he was nursing an injury, what have you. It'll be interesting to hear a little more about why he was so hot and cold at Middle Tennessee State, but certainly a guy who has a nice 3-point shooting percentage. I think it was 36, 37, somewhere in there. And, that's what you're asking for, right? So uh, the other thing that I want to bring up real quick, and maybe it's not even worth bringing up, but hey, check out our website, clemsonkickoff.com. It's got kickoff times, it's got archives of episodes and blogs, some offers. It's a simple resource for you. You saw Jaden Zachary hit the portal, Ian Shefflin hit the portal. Now we know Jaden Zachary has applied for a waiver with the NCAA, and then Shefflin had a very nice post that he put out there on X, or Twitter, as you may want to call it, about trying to make sure that this is just like a fail-safe. Like if something were to happen with eligibility, he'd have that option if he wanted to come back to NCAA basketball and or Clemson in particular. I think the odds of both those things are pretty low. I actually would like to think that the odds on Zachary are a little better because he had already applied for that waiver, and it's the kind of waiver that other guys have gotten. But everything I'm reading says, probably not. So maybe you keep the door cracked open with those last 2 scholarship or last 2 roster spots, or at least expected to be roster spots if the House settlement goes through. And maybe you have one or both of those guys back, even if the chances are slim.
Yeah, and then that gives you another boost, right? Either one of them or both. Then you're
Yeah.
talking about a big piece of the puzzle that last year's team did not have. I'm not saying this coming team is going to be better than this past year. I mean, that team, you can see the record there, 27-7, 18-2 in the ACC. I'm not saying it's going to be better, but Bill, it feels deeper,
Yeah.
does it not? I mean, you look at if the freshmen contribute anything, which I think a lot of that depends on the head coach. If the two redshirt freshmen contribute anything, again, the freshman, the head coach. But this team feels like it's deeper. Where at the end of this past year, when Dylan Hunter got hurt, it didn't feel like there were any options on the bench, and you're playing 6, 7 guys, and that's just not the way to survive in tournament basketball. You've got to have some depth. So, yeah, I think maybe you leave those spots open to see what happens, and then if those things don't happen, you go out and get a couple of walk-ons to fill those last couple of roster spots and just roll with this group that you've signed.
All right, real quick, something that I meant to bring up while we were talking baseball and slipped my mind. I didn't intend for it to be at the end, but what a win for Clemson softball on the road,
Yeah.
#1 team in the country. Was fortunate that where I was at that time, I was able to catch a little bit of it on TV. I wasn't able to really focus on it, but wow, what a victory for the Tigers! And as you've talked about before, a huge turnaround after kind of a slow start to the season, or a very slow start to the season, to have really gotten this young roster into some winning ways in a hurry.
Yeah, 3-6 to start the season and losing to SEC teams, right? Losing to those kinds of teams that it didn't feel like you could compete with those kinds of teams. But Bill, that's changed. I mean, you look at where they are the past 2 weeks. I mean, they beat South Carolina. It was a top 10 team at the time. They beat Tennessee last night. The pitching last night, again, this is a powerhouse team for Tennessee, and Reese Basinger and Brooke McCubbin were both really, really good. They scratch out some runs
Yeah.
um, against a real power arm for Tennessee. So huge win. You got to say that the senior leadership of Maddie Moore and Abby Vieira and Alex Brown, and then those freshmen. The contribution of those 6 or 7 freshmen it seems like every time one of them steps in, they come up with something, and
Yeah.
that really, I would say, lends to a bright future. We never know with the portal who's going to be here next year, but this turnaround of this softball team, Bill, I think you're looking at a team that's going to host a regional. And when you were 3-6 at that point, I don't think there was any chance that anybody was thinking about that at the time.
Yeah, the fan support is certainly there, and if the committee understands, hey, you're hot going into the end of the season there,
Yep.
then that really should play in the Tigers' favor. I think it's going to be a heck of a postseason. I'd love to get to Durham, or I'd love to get to the regional for the baseball team and keep an eye on them and see them. It's been a while since I've seen them. We'll just have to see how my schedule plays out and what can happen. But
We need to
I,
make a group trip.
yeah, all right. Reign Supreme All Podcast on location.
There you
You're
go. I like
you're
it.
right here for the brainstorming of the whole project. So we'll see how it
Absolutely.
goes. And gosh, I don't know how the schedules line up, but if both were able to be home at the same time late in the season or postseason, that's just going to be an electric atmosphere that would be a lot of fun to be a part of. So we will keep you up to date as everything unfolds, as baseball and softball winds up, as we start to see what's happening with that House settlement and how that may impact all of Clemson athletics across the board, as football continues recruiting and anything that may develop from here on basketball. I kind of think the men's basketball team is what it is. And we still haven't had a chance to get into the flurry of transfers and commitments for the women's basketball team under who
Right.
will be second year coach now, Sean Poppy. So much going on, and we can barely squeeze it all in. If I don't know, maybe if people start watching enough and we start making a little revenue off of this, maybe it won't be a side gig anymore someday. Maybe we can pour ourselves into this full force.
How about that? I like it.
I think we're several years, if not light years away from that, but who knows? Dare to dream.
retirement
So,
age when we start doing that, right?
yeah, that's right. You'll see our walkers in the background at that point. So, hey, until our next episode, we are really glad you stuck with us for this one. I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.